Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Tuesday, August 14th, 2018, regularly scheduled council meeting. Please stand for the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Buck.
Mayor Ziegler.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Beagle.
Here.
Councilmember Gottschall.
Here.
Councilmember Kennedy.
Here.
Councilmember Leader.
Here.
Councilmember Resnick.
Here.
Councilmember Smiley.
Here.
Quorum present.
Thank you. Are there any changes or additions to the agenda, Mr. Brown?
No real changes to the agenda, Your Honor. A correction on the parking lot item that had a cost reflected on a third parking lot project of $500. That should be stricken and left off, adjusted accordingly.
Okay, we'll make note of it when it comes up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody from the bench here? Okay. Mr. Resnick?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I would like to have correspondence item number 3, email from Renee Samp regarding the Wixom Community Foundation Wolford Scholarship, new business item number 8 for discussion.
Okay. Anybody else? Any comments? Okay. All right, the first item on the agenda for this evening is a presentation, appreciation of the Wixom Christian Schools participation in the Adopt a Road program. Is anybody here from the school? Come on up. We'll make a presentation here. Whereas the City of Wixom has developed and established an Adopt a Road program, and whereas the purpose of the Adopt a Road program is to save taxpayer dollars by providing assistance to clean the city's streets and roadways, raise public awareness of the cost of littering, promote civic responsibility, pride, and volunteerism, improve the environment. Now therefore be it resolved that the Mayor and the City Council of the City of Wixom, Michigan hereby recognize and commend students and administration of the Wixom Christian School for their volunteerism, dedication, and assistance to the City of Wixom through their participation in the Wixom Adopt a Road program. Now therefore be it resolved that the Mayor and City Council of the City of Wixom hereby recognize, commend, I think I just read that. I think it's a little duplication there, but in any ways, we really appreciate your being involved in it, and we'll wish you the best. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Sure. Stick around for the meeting. I always try to get a plug in that you're welcome to stay as long as you like, but you're not required to if you don't feel like it.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks for good. You're not leaving, are you, Tim? No, I'll be right All right. Next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. There are 2 sets of minutes to approve this evening. First is a joint City Council and Planning Commission meeting of July 16, 2018. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support. Any discussion, corrections, deletions, additions? I have a motion and a second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. The second set of minutes is the regular City Council meeting of July 24th, 2018. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support. Any discussion on it? Any corrections? Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Correspondence, there are 2 remaining items under the correspondence. The first is the Michigan Municipal League letter regarding road funding, and the second is Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation letter regarding $2.2 million grant for the Michigan Airline Trail. Next item on the agenda is the first call to the public. We got some rules for the speaking to the public, which I will read momentarily. Here are the rules for addressing the council this evening. First call to the public. The public shall address the council during the call to the public, which shall be included on the agenda immediately after correspondence and again immediately after new business. The first call to the public immediately after correspondence shall be limited to agenda items only. A person shall not address the council in excess of 5 minutes unless the time is extended by a majority vote of the council present. Persons wishing to address the council shall identify themselves and their place of residence and shall state their reasons for addressing the council, and all comments by the public shall be made directly to the council. Anyone wishing to address the council this evening on any agenda items?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I was going to hold off on this new business number 8 until the second call to the public, but I see that you've moved it as to new business, so I just as soon bring up my concerns now. My name is Kevin Hinckley. My address is 3250 Johanna Ware, Wixom. I'm here on behalf of the residents of the community, the Wixom taxpayers, contributors to the Wixom Community Foundation. Councilman Smiley, as a board member of the WCF, have you thoroughly read the WCF bylaws?
I'm sorry, what, say it again?
As a member of the Wixom Community Foundation, as a board member.
Yes.
He's not allowed to ask questions directly of the council. He's supposed to address the entire council as a whole.
Well, I can't stop what he asks, but certainly the council member would have the option of not answering. I mean,
So my question to you is, you've read the bylaws of the Wixom Community Foundation?
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Kennedy, the same? I'll take that as a no. The Wixom Community Foundation mission statement is to enhance the quality of life and strengthen the spirit of the community through leadership and stewardship and endowment of funds and donations. The WCF conflict of interest policy, the Wixom Community Foundation, has been active since 2009. In order to get the 501c3 application approved by the IRS, the WCF needed to adopt a conflict of interest policy. It states in Article 1, the purpose of the policy is to protect the Wixom Community Foundation's interest when it is contemplating entering into a transaction or arrangement that might benefit the private interests of an officer or a director of the foundation or might result in a possible excess benefit transaction. The policy was intended to supplement, but not replace, any applicable state and federal laws governing conflict of interest applicable to non-profit and charitable organizations. At the October 15, 2009 WCF board meeting, which I was in attendance, the founding board members discussed adopting this policy. Mr. Kennedy made a motion to adopt the conflict of interest policy, and the motion was carried. All members had to sign and acknowledge the form stating that they have received a copy of the policy, have read and understood the policy, and agree to comply with the policy. In addition to the adopted conflict of interest policy, the WCF Board of Directors reference conflicts of interest throughout the document. Mr. Kennedy, as a founding member of the chairperson of the WCF, one would think it is your duty to see that all the WCF board members comply with this conflict of interest policy that is supposed to be signed annually by each director, principal officer, and members of a committee with governing board delegated powers. In the minutes of the April 26, 2018 Wixom Community Foundation Committee Report, Scholarship Committee, WCF board member Mr. Smiley has set up, these are the minutes as I'm reading them, Mr. Smiley has set up all the scholarships online where the applicants can apply online, as well as setting up a Facebook scholarship blast. It is stated, or he stated, that we have received a few submittals and anticipate more in the next 3 weeks. One would think by reading these minutes that it appears through these minutes that Mr. Smiley was involved in the scholarship process and may have been on the scholarship committee. This year, the WCF received several student applications for the Wolford Scholarship, which represents a $2,500 award. The winners of the 2018 scholarships were posted on the Wixom Community Foundation website July 5th. These winners of the scholarship were presented at a City of Wixom event on July 19th. One of the applications was from the son of Foundation board member, Mr. Smiley. However, Mr. Smiley's son may have been very deserving. I'm sure he is. I'm sure he was. The application should have been rejected due to a clear conflict of interest. A board member's son. Foundation Chairman Nick Kennedy presented the Wolford Scholarship to board member Smiley's son at the July 19th ceremony. Kind of wonder how Mr. Kennedy could not recognize that this is a conflict when several people in the crowd had said many things that something smells here. However, this is not illegal to do this. It's extremely unethical. It's a clear conflict of interest. And you're putting the WCF federal tax exempt status in jeopardy by doing this. In closing, I'm not closing yet, but what I'm going to tell you is that the WCF is operated entirely on the back of the City of Wixom taxpayers, all of us. The original intent 10 years ago was for the city to assist the foundation for a few years until the foundation could get financially stable on its feet. By reading through the WCF minutes for the last couple of years, it doesn't appear that there was much of an effort to break away from the city and go off on their own. I believe it's time to separate the City of Wixom and the Wixom Community Foundation. You may have betrayed the community and the public trust and the donor base trust by these actions. In addition, you're supposed to be good leaders and stewards per the WCF mission statement. Remember that the purpose of the WCF was to give back to the community, not take. As one tends to be concerned based on your actions as board members of the WCF, do these actions translate on how you make decisions as City of Wixom council members?
Mr. Hinckley, I think your time is about up.
In closing, I'd like to recommend that the Wixom City Council divest the city's support administratively from the Wixom Community Foundation. Councilman Kennedy and Councilman Smiley should have to refrain from voting due to a conflict of interest. Thank you kindly.
Anybody else wishing to address the council on any agenda items this evening? Seeing no one else, I'll close the first call to the public. Next item on the agenda is the city manager's reports. The first report is the fire department report for for June of 2018. Anybody have any comments, questions? The only comment I would have is, and I don't think it's on here, but the Camp 911 was a huge success again, and the community really thanks the fire department and the Department of Public Safety for putting that on for our youngsters. Thank you. Next item is the city manager report relative to the police department for the same period of time, June of 2018. Any points, questions? Mr. Resnick.
Just a comment. Thank you, Public Safety Director Moore, for breaking out the TSI initiative. This was the period from June 25th through July 19th, not even a full month. And there were 124 stops in the TSI area. And I have to say personally, to and from work, I have not been on Loon Lake, Maple, or Charms yet where I have not seen an officer have someone pulled over, either issuing the warning or citation. So good job. I feel it's been effective. I've noticed a change in behavior. particularly at the 7:30 timeframe. So,
Thank you, Councilman Resnick, and I'm looking forward to seeing how effective it has been. The traffic study that I requested on Potter has been completed, and I will be requesting another one just before the kids go back to school to see if there has been an improvement in the speeds.
Anybody else? Anybody? Okay, thanks, Ron. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. All items under the consent agenda are considered routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member so requests, in which event the items will be removed from the consent agenda and added to regular agenda at the end of unfinished or new business. Do I have a motion?
so moved. Support.
I have a motion and support. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is consideration of the mayoral appointment of Roy Thorsell as the alternate to the Zoning Board of Appeals with a term to expire June 30th, 2021. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Mr. Thorsell is here. Would you like to come up and introduce yourself?
Sure.
Appreciate your volunteering and putting in for this.
Yeah, my name's Roy Thorsell. I live at 3207 Potter Road. Yeah, I just wanted to get a little more involved. I originally got involved with the whole hoopla with trying to build apartments and stuff behind the Wixom Elementary area, so that's when I started to really get involved. But I plan on raising my family here, so I kind of want to stay involved and help out however I can. A few things about me: I have a master's in mechanical engineering, do lots of automotive part design, and then as a hobby, I do lots of artwork and illustration. This is one appointment that I would accept, but I'm willing to help out the city, like designing signs or whatever comes up where I just need an extra hand for that kind of skill set. So you guys know me, so I'm available.
Great.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much. Okay, I have a motion and a second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Congratulations, you've joined the team.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is a recommendation to accept Hubble, Roth, and Clark's proposal for engineering services for the fire station and Gibson House parking areas and construction engineering for the fire station, Gibson House, and Waynestock parking areas for a price not to exceed $83,750. And this is, I think, Mr. Brown, where you suggested there might be some change in this. So.
Correct. So before Tim has anything to offer up front, I'd like to just cover that quickly with your indulgence. In the table in the center of the report that's before council, there's parking lot projects listed for 3 different projects: the fire department, Gibson House, and Waynestock. There was a small cost associated with design engineering on the Waynestock parking lot of $500, which we're striking and reducing that to 0 or NA, like the construction engineering. And that would leave the costs in the recommendation to be reduced by a corresponding amount of $500, so it would be $83,250 total. So that's the correction up front that I'd like to have considered by the council, and then with that I can let Tim provide the overview that he was going to provide.
Did we have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Okay.
Amended, or are we gonna?
Well, there wasn't a motion to begin with. I don't think. I just read the.
Correct.
So your motion is for the lower amount, I mentioned.
No. Yep. Okay.
All right, we got Mr. Kennedy's motion and Mr. Resnick's second. You're on, Tim.
All right, so during our budget hearings, we had added the fire department, and the Gibson House parking was part of the CDGB funding source that we were working on. We're asking HRC to provide the engineering services for this. one of the items in there was to put out the bid process, and in order to try and get economies of scale for all 3 of these projects, we asked them to also put in the bid for the Wayne stock parking. As you know, that the engineering for that parking lot has been donated by Diffin-Umler of the city of Wixom, and we are very grateful for that, and we've been working with them to get the rest of the specifications for that to be put in with the bids that will be going out with Gibson and Fire Department.
Okay.
And one more thing, Your Honor, to mention on that, if I can. The Wayne stock parking lot, the reason we don't have engineering costs on there is we had a offer from a engineering firm based in the city of Wixom to provide engineering at a 0 cost on that. So estimating that it's difficult because I don't know all the parameters of what the cost of the project could be, but assuming it's about a $500,000 expense, there's a range that the fees could be, but that's a substantial contribution by virtue of foregoing any fees on that we save. Probably minimum $50,000 and up to $100,000 if it's 20% of the project costs. So
wow.
Just wanted to make mention of that by Diffin-Umler, the engineering firm.
Well, thank you to Diffin-Umler. That's great. Does anybody have any questions? Mr. Gottschall.
Thank you. So for the Gibson House, is that from CDBG funding, that amount, or can we not use that funding for engineering costs?
I believe we can use that for engineering costs. The issue is that it's part of the Davis-Bacon Act, and so we have to have prevailing wages and different things that are tracked throughout that process, and HRC usually helps us with that. But
for that portion of the cost, that's not coming out of city funds necessarily, that's coming out of CDBG funds?
I believe the way we've worked it was that it'll come out of city funds, and then a portion that because we have budgeted for that in the Parks and Rec budget for this. The rest of the costs would come out of that funding source. So I think it's an in and out, just from what I understand from Maryland for that. But we still have to pay it up front, so I wanted to make sure that we got that cost in there. I can get you a better answer here once Deanna gets back.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Mr. Resnick.
I just had a follow-on question to that. With the 2,800 square feet anticipated size of the lot, approximately how many vehicles will that hold?
The way it was looking, it was like, what, 3 or 4 right on the property, so it's before you get to the loop.
Okay,
And
by the
there's
side door
just,
there?
Yeah, next to the garage there'll be like 3 or 4 there, and then you can get a few. And then it's more of a driveway than a parking lot, but yeah.
Anybody else? Okay. We have a motion to accept Hubleroth and Clark's proposal for engineering design services for the fire station Gibson House areas and the construction engineering for the fire station Gibson House and Wayne stock parking areas for a price not to exceed $83,250. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed.
Your Honor, I think I do have a math correction to that. I apologize. I was trying to work through it in my head. And I was trying to get it done before you read it, and I apologize. So we might have to do an amendment.
Steered me wrong.
Yeah, sorry. But since we're covering both design engineering and construction engineering costs, I just want to make sure that we're right here. Yep, no, we're good. I got the math, 83,250. That's correct. I had a correction that I thought I needed to make, but we're
I
good.
think I was listening in second grade.
Sorry, my
That's right.
math skills.
Thank you.
I was looking at the wrong numbers. My
Thank you.
fault.
Okay. We all set with that one?
Yes.
Next item on the agenda is the recommendation to accept Suez proposal for dewatering and cleaning the equalization basins as part of the stormwater asset management and wastewater, or SAW grant, for a total cost not to exceed $150,000. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Discussion. Tim?
So as you know, we do have that SAW grant that will be ending in November, and we've with all of the projects that we had, we've been able to have some extra funds for this. So we're squeezing this part of the program into that fund as well, and it'll be a 75% reimbursement of this $150,000 that the state will give us here sometime in November. So we're grateful to have Suez be able to clean it, and with them and HRC looking at the infrastructure underneath, will determine, you know, what would need to be repaired in the future. So it's a pretty good thing to happen.
Mr. Resnick.
So the age of the equalization tanks, what's the approximate age?
So the approximate, they were built along with the major part of the new plant in '93.
93. So when they get emptied, the liquids and the solids out of there, and they do the visual inspection, is it likely we're going to find cracks in the interior walls? Or?
Yes, there may be some cracks. When we looked at the oxidation ditches, we were under the water surface. It was fairly good, and so we're kind of hopeful. But there is a barrier between the north and the south EQ basins that we're kind of concerned with. But for the most part, it's the cleaning that's going to be the most beneficial piece of that.
But if defects are found, my guess is they'd have to immediately be repaired, right?
Right, and typically with cracks like that, and Karen can correct me if I'm wrong, we would go in with some hydrocement and repair those at that time.
So not super expensive repairs?
Not that piece.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Sure.
Okay, we have a motion to accept Suez proposal for dewatering and cleaning the equalization basins as a part of the stormwater asset management and wastewater grant for a total not to exceed $150,000. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. Thank you. Item number 4, recommendation to accept the drainage improvement agreement with Landrow Development Company of Wixom, Michigan, including reimbursements for costs up to $30,000 to accept D'Angelo Brothers Construction of Farmington, Michigan's bid proposal for the installation of a drainage culvert and improvements to the drainage for a reimbursable cost not to exceed $25,327.70. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Support.
I have a motion and support. Tim?
So this participation agreement that we've worked out with the Landrow property, and we have members of the property owners here tonight, and we're in agreement. During some research of the property, we found that the stormwater that drains to the north of that property, there was a culvert that went underneath the DNR trail, and it was higher than both the discharge and the receiving area. So there's about a 8 to 10 inch gap where it holds water on the Landrow's property side of that. And with potential development, we'd like to straighten that out, and moving forward to the north, there's a ditch line that also needs to be cleared to meet grade going to the receiving culvert. So with those two things, we requested a bid from our underground contractor. He's agreed to do this work for the $25,327, and with some help with the agreement through our legal team, we were requesting reimbursement from the Jim Chase and the Landrow Development.
Okay, any questions? Okay. I have a motion and a second to accept the drainage improvement agreement with Landrow Development Company. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 5 is a request for authorization to participate in the group purchase tag-on bid option with the City of Novi, Michigan, to purchase a replacement heavy rescue with Jaws of Life from the Sutphen Corporation of Amlin, Ohio, through Apollo Fire Apparatus of Romeo, Michigan, in the amount of $602,813,075, and approval of the associated budget amendment. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
That's a lot of money. You'd think they would have rounded it down, you know, to make it look a little easier. Any discussion? Anybody have any? Mr. Smiley?
Thanks, sir. Oh, this is for Mr. Brown, but just to be.
Oh, I might have to reach out to our fire chief, you never know.
Well, I asked you earlier, did you find out what we saved by, by working with Novi to get the?
Now, I did not have a chance to try to track that down with the people that I thought I might, and I was going to rely on Jeff to provide some information potentially on that.
You should be able to.
They don't really tell you the exact numbers. And the reason I tell you that is we get customer loyalty points because our last two apparatus were purchased from the same company.
Oh,
So they've made concessions in that arena. And we just know that we matched when like processes for the apparatus, theirs was bid and we get the same price break. It's typically about 15%, but they can't tell us specifically.
okay, I can live with that. Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Resnick?
So we had 19 years of life out of the existing one.
Current.
Is it expected to last 20 years? Any new technology involved?
20 years is the roundabout number for the type of apparatus and the use it sees in our community.
So we get pretty regular use of the Jaws of Life then?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thanks.
Anyone else? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. Thanks, Jeff. Item number 6, recommendation to certify the Transportation Alternatives Program grant from the Michigan Department of Transportation, authorization of the Michigan Airline Trail Development and Safety Improvements Project, and adopt the authorizing resolution. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support?
Discussion. Anything you want to add, or?
No, unless there's any questions, I tried to cover it as comprehensively as I could in this report that was provided. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, Mr. Gatchel.
Thank you. I believe in a recent meeting we had voted on an agreement that I think was going to Walled Lake and Commerce as well,
Yes.
calling on them to pay within 30 days of us calling on them.
Right.
Have they passed that? Have they agreed to it?
Yes, both Walled Lake and Commerce have passed the same language on the cost participation agreement. We should get a copy of the final agreement. Sometimes when you have these multiple community arrangements, it gets a little challenging to get all the signatures in one spot, but ultimately we're going to get a document that has signatures from all 3 communities on there that we'll have for our files, but that's been approved by all 3 now.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Okay, I have a motion and a second to certify the Transportation Alternative Program grant from the Michigan Department of Transportation and authorize the Michigan Airline Trail Development and Safety Improvements Project and adopt the authorizing resolution. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. Thank you. Item number 7, a recommendation to approve the contribution of $5,000 to the City of Escanaba for the Menards Tax Tribunal appeal hearing to determine actual/appropriate valuation of retail big box stores in the state of Michigan. Do I have a motion?
Support?
This came before us in a letter from Escanaba a few months ago, and we talked about it then a little bit. We talked about the possibility, because what they're doing there is fighting some I think it's Menards, yeah, and if they end up losing this case, it ends up adversely affecting all the communities that have those big box types of entities in their jurisdiction. And so, you know, we talked about it at the time. I think several of us thought it was a pretty good idea to maybe chip in, and hopefully they win this litigation, rather than sit back and do nothing and then end up not being able to appeal it or anything. We talked about the possibility of doing an amicus brief as well. This probably takes place of that.
Correct.
And it's probably needed by that city in order to fight the battle. Any discussion? Mr. Resnick?
As a question, have you been able to canvass any of our local communities with big box stores like Novi and Commerce in Lyon Township? And see
Yeah,
if they're also
the 2 out of 3 of those, Councilman, I did not get information from Lyon Township, but I got it from Commerce and from Novi. Novi contributed $5,000 towards it. Commerce contributed $2,000 towards it. There's many other communities that have made contributions to it. Some of the information wasn't exactly something I was able to get really good detail on in terms of names and amounts of communities. They were a little reluctant on that front. But I did talk to the Commerce folks and the Novi folks and did verify those 2 amounts. So we're at the high end of that because I think it's some things have changed since some of these communities have made contributions to this. The potential impact is getting bigger. Basically because of some additional information that's coming to light. Originally, if you're thinking of it just in terms of big box stores, that would have a big impact with the city of Wixom potentially too, if those store valuations were far less than they had been previously, which could be the result of a loss for Escanaba in this tax tribunal review. But since that time, there's been additional information that other retail type of establishments, auto parts stores, fast food restaurants are also looking with a keen eye towards maybe adopting that kind of an approach to getting their own valuations lowered and the corresponding revenues to cities reduced. So I think with some additional impact on the table for us and some other things that have come to light, like the documentation that I provided with the report that you've got available to you, with information from our attorney and other things of that sort, I thought it was worth recommending that we do the $5,000 contribution towards the cost. Escanaba incurred about $190,000 in cost on their initial court case, which came out favorable to them in the end when they appealed it to the Court of Appeals and then was upheld by the Supreme Court. But then it was referred back to this tax tribunal, a group of 3 judges, for them to review, and basically that could cause the approach to change again. And that's where I think it's in our best interest to step in and help Escanaba out. They're a much smaller community in terms of their financial resources. They've already absorbed $190,000 worth of costs. The costs on this last leg of the process are projected to be over $200,000. So if you can imagine us trying to absorb a $300,000 or $400,000 expense and then have their revenues be much lower than our percentage on a percentage basis, that's a real challenge for Escanaba, and we don't want them to fold up their tents for lack of resources, and that's why I think it's appropriate for us to make a contribution. We have checked out a couple of different things. At first they were saying you can make contributions to legal defense funds and all that, but there's been additional information that's come to light as well that we're within or we're on solid legal ground to make direct contributions to Escanaba as opposed to making a contribution to some legal defense fund that they have access to. So I would just recommend making a direct contribution to Escanaba of $5,000.
And I certainly fully support that. Anybody else have any? Mr. Kennedy.
Mr. Brown, it talks here that they've lost all the way through the appeals court and now it's going back to the Michigan Tax Tribunal. Did the attorneys ever give you the odds of what it looks like, what's going on?
Well, they lost initially, they won at the Court of Appeals, and then the Supreme Court upheld that. But one of the things that happened after that was the Court of Appeals referred it back to a new tax tribunal hearing that could change things. And that's where we're at this stage of the process. They lost initially, they won the appeal, then the Supreme Court upheld that win on appeal, but the Court of Appeals then referred it back to this tax tribunal to take some additional information from both sides and come up with something that's an appropriate way to value these kind of stores. So while they've won at the Court of Appeals and at the Michigan Supreme Court level, it's now been referred back to this tax tribunal where they could change the valuation process again. And that's where things are a bit at risk again, and that's why we're making a contribution for them to have expert witnesses and to have other information to make a strong case for why the stores are more appropriately valued in a different way than this dark store theory.
And our city attorney thinks that this can be carried over to restaurants or any other kind of business.
Yeah, that's our city attorney hasn't made that comment. That's been coming from Michigan Municipal League and other sources. But the attorney's office has reviewed all that information and making their recommendation to us, which is contained in the packet that says it would be worthwhile to make a contribution to see this appeal go in a way that would further the city's interest in the long run financially.
I think we can let them know.
Anybody else? Mr. Leader.
Does the Michigan Municipal League have a lobby? Like in?
Yes.
And I guess the question I'm asking is, wouldn't a more prudent approach be to contribute to the lobby to close the dark store loophole with the legislature, as opposed to having a panel of 3 judges try to decide and then take it forward, and then at the end of the day we can still go back that way and do that? Have there been any discussions on it that you've heard, or?
That may well be true, but again, it was a Menards case that was initiated by Menards against Escanaba that was initially successful on Menards' part. Escanaba responded with the appeal at the Court of Appeals, and that's proceeded through the legal process up to this tax tribunal phase because of that. So I don't think it was anybody's decision to go that way except for an outside parties.
No, I'm talking about moving forward now, where the process is gone. It's been upheld, remanded, sent back, and it sounds to me, and I haven't read the case, but it sounds that they're looking for additional evidence of valuation because the Court of Appeals had incomplete information. So they're looking back to try to determine what the actual dark store math valuation is and how that affects the community and to balance the public interest scenario. So I guess the question, to rephrase it another way, is it will be a continuous loop, because once the tribunal does that, it will go up on appeal either way, either side. No matter what, will go back up on appeal. But the issue comes down to, for at least locally here in the city of Wixom, is none of the stores will have the right to go back and reevaluate. But moving forward, they'll be able to reevaluate and try to take the dark store approach, is the way that I'm reading all of this. But if the dark store approach goes away, then retroactively they can't go back, and the only windfall at the end of the day will be either for Menards or the city of Escanaba for whatever taxes have been withheld between the start of this case and the end-all resolution. So back to the question, is there a lobbying group that is going back to try to change the tax code as it's sitting here, or are they just sitting idly and waiting for the resolution of the case, or do you not know?
I can't speak to that directly in terms of having seen anything in writing anywhere, but on the information that's been reviewed by myself and the people that are associated with the case, like the MML and other groups, Michigan Townships Association, et cetera, what the outcome is expected to be is an approach to valuation that should carry the day from there forward, is the story that's being told to me. It's not going to be an isolated case. That'll be that will be how they are valued. It'll be difficult for either side to come up with something different once that's established. So that's the reason why it makes sense from my perspective to make that contribution. And in defense of that, the MML, which does have an active lobbying staff, and they're very adept and regular practitioners of lobbying the legislature on these issues, they're not advocating taking that approach, and I'm assuming that's for a reason.
Okay.
And they're relying on this outcome.
Just kind of see what the other alternatives would be.
Right. They're not shy about lobbying and trying to get things changed legislatively, and they've not mentioned that in any correspondence I've seen. So there might be, maybe there's dim prospects. I'm just speculating.
Okay. Anybody else? Mr. Gosh?
Thank you. I had just noticed that they bolded and underlined a sentence on the second page talking about if they settle, then they'll reimburse everyone's funding that they sent them.
Right.
And while I support sending them money, it seems like an odd kind of an out, because the point of the letter is let's all fight this together. and then they very clearly say, if we kind of bail on this and we decide to settle, all of you are going to fend for yourselves and we'll send you your money back.
Right, and then we'll be back in the same position. Somewhere, somebody else will be picked for this fight.
Exactly. So I'm wondering
Right.
if there's like a stipulation that the settlement is public or something like that. Because if they do decide to settle, even though they're sending us our $5,000 back, we're probably going to face some challenges down the road of our own. Then I was just doing some research earlier today about Meyer, for example. Wixom pays a little under $300,000 a year in taxes. Do we have any idea how that would affect, like if they decided to start following this kind of a theory, what our property taxes would look like from them?
No, there's a little bit of art to the way that gets applied, so we'd have to see what their brushstrokes look like, I guess, when they were trying to make the case to the tribunal. That's how that would go. You know, if this were never decided, say for example, if the agreement was come to between Escanaba and Menards and they didn't pursue it through the end of this process. Like you sort of alluded to there, I believe somebody would have to be selected after that for the next case, and then we'd start this process all over again. And I'm hopeful that Escanaba is not going to do that, not going to take that approach just from the standpoint of your concerns would be my concerns in terms of having to relitigate this and having to go through this process again. But secondly, I have heard that there was talk of a settlement, but nothing has happened on that front, and it doesn't look like anything is going to happen on that front, for what it's worth.
Okay.
Don't know for sure, but for right now, it doesn't look likely.
But we've never looked just for our own sake to see what we have our kind of big retailers paying now, and then worst case scenario based on what's out there for sale or sold, what the hit would be if something like this happened.
Yeah, it'd be probably pretty tough to come up with an accurate estimate. We could certainly come up with some idea of what it might be, and we could do some work on that front. But suffice to say, with the number of stores and other possible entities that are involved, and one thing that I didn't mention earlier when I talked about additional stores, looking at that, like the fast food locations and auto parts stores, it also applies to like corporate headquarters potentially, or they're looking at making it apply to those kind of things, of which Wixom is home to many. So the impact on Wixom would be really pretty big. I can't give you a dollar amount, but we could work on some kind of an estimate on that, but it's going to be quite substantial, and that's why we think it's appropriate to make an investment into seeing that not become the case in the future. Now's the time to have a fix on this that hopefully is not detrimental to communities.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else? Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the contribution of $5,000 to the City of Escanaba for the Menards Tax Tribunal Appeals hearing to determine actual or appropriate valuation of retail big box stores in the state of Michigan. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. Thanks. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the letter that was moved from correspondence. I think before I call on Mr. Resnick, I'll read the letter to give the issue some relevance to the people.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. I am a part of the Wolford Community Foundation Board, and this directly relates to me. I like to recuse myself from the discussion.
Oh, okay. I guess we'd have to vote on that. I guess motion for the recusal.
I can't vote on that either.
All right, somebody want to make
I'll make a motion to accept the...
Okay.
Seconded.
All in favor?
But wouldn't the recusal just be for the vote as opposed to discussion?
Well, generally speaking, would it be the discussion as well, but we don't know what the discussion is. What we're doing here is just reading, I'm reading a letter, and I'm going to find out what Mr. Resnick has in mind and why he did want it moved over, and that would be the...
Okay.
So...
Sorry, my other question, usually when Mr. Resnick does this as well, it's ahead of time, which is fine, ahead of discussion, but it's when there's financial standing potentially to come, and this is already, I guess, passed. So I'm just, I don't know. It's an odd thing.
Well, it might
because
be.
usually, like
Play
Mr.
it safe and just,
Okay.
you know, rather than cause any issues, I'm happy to go.
Well, I tell you what, why don't we do this? Why don't we wait till we see what we're talking about before you excuse yourself, and then.
We've all read it.
Well, that's what I'm saying is it needs to be given context to the audience. And then I don't know what Mr. Resnick has to say relative to this, so maybe at that point, it might be the point of the.
Motion back.
Pardon me?
I'll take the motion
Okay,
back.
very good. It's addressed to me, and I felt that it was my obligation to place it on the agenda under correspondence so that everybody would share in the concerns that the writer has. And it says, Mr. Ziegler, the great work of our city officials do and the great work that our city officials do and the support from places like the Wixom Community Foundation are what makes living in Wixom such an enjoyable place to live and raise a family. However, I would like to share an experience that I am not sure shows Wixom in its best light. This past spring, my son applied for the Wolford scholarship. We were excited to learn of this scholarship because, surprisingly enough, it is hard to find scholarships for young white males whose parents both work and they do not suffer from a hardship. The Wolford scholarship criteria clearly states that the applicants must be pursuing a career in STEM fields, that's science, technology, engineering, math, and environment. Their son will be pursuing. Looking at both the past winners from 2017, who were both pursuing engineering careers. My husband and I felt that their son had a good chance, and we encouraged him to apply. We had hoped he would make it to phase 2 and be invited back for an interview and make a presentation to the board as stated in the application process, but he never heard back. In early July, I called the Wixom Community Foundation to check the status of the scholarship awards. When I called, I was informed that they did not conduct interviews this year, and the scholarship recipients for all of the Wixom Community Foundation scholarships had been selected, and that John Smiley was the recipient of the Wolford scholarship. I asked for any feedback that I could provide my son on where he fell short for future reference. I was told that my son had come in second place for the Wolford scholarship. However, they were only awarding one this year. We were disappointed but pleased to know that he was a second place selection. Later, we learned that the recipient, John Smiley, is related to Robert Smiley, Wixom Community Foundation board member and a member of the Wixom City Council. I am certainly not questioning John's qualifications in any way. However, to be honest, this is very disheartening and makes one wonder if they even have a chance at winning the scholarship if they don't know someone who is connected to the board in some way. Furthermore, it sends a message to future candidates that the scholarship is unattainable if you don't know someone on the board or city council, and thus diminishes the original intent of the scholarship. Apparently, due to the low number of applicants this year, which the applicants were not aware of or can control, the board decided to award only one scholarship this year. Since the recipient, John Smiley, is pursuing a welding certificate at Schoolcraft College, which is a one-year program, and the scholarship is renewable for 4 years, I am wondering if the board will reconsider their decision to only award one scholarship and award the second scholarship for this year like in past years. I tried calling the Wixom Community Foundation but was unable to speak with either of the directors. I'm hoping that you may be able to reach them. I encourage you to review the application of their son submitted for the scholarship and his ratings from the board. Zachary is pursuing a mechanical engineering degree from Michigan State University, graduated summa cum laude from Walled Lake Western, and I would be happy to and he would be happy to make a presentation to the board. Your consideration is greatly appreciated. Again, I read that to give context to the discussion, which I assume is going to ensue. And I'll ask, since Mr. Resnick asked to do this, move this over, I'm going to ask him to go ahead and speak.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as one of the original founding committee members for the Wixom Community Foundation and one of the current major donors, I share a lot of Mrs. Samp's concerns. And particularly as well, I also share concerns about the foundation board makeup as it currently stands. During the process of establishing the Wixom Community Foundation back in the mid-2000s, we were given advice from existing foundation executive directors. And this is when we were still a committee and not yet a board. And so people like Mr. Smiley and Mr. Kennedy weren't on the board yet. But as a committee, we were given very, very strong advice, because at the time the committee existed of Mr. Hinckley, Mr. Dornan, Mr. Brady, Kevin Brady, our finance director at the time, myself, Ms. McGee, and we were strongly advised to separate the city from the foundation as soon as possible. And that is, we should seek board members from the private sector, community leaders who aren't elected officials or actually paid members of the city employment. And since WCF was founded in 2009, this has yet to be achieved. I mean, we still have 2 sitting council members on the foundation board, and they vote. The day before the awards were given, my having read the full list of recipients, not only including the Resnick Family Scholarship, but the Wolford Scholarship, I sent an email directly to the Grants Committee Chair, Josh Springer, just asking for the names of the Grants Committee and their email addresses. I've yet to receive a reply for that. Having not received a reply, I did a FOIA request for minutes of the last couple meetings. I wanted to see the latest 990 because it wasn't filed with the state yet. It's still not available with the IRS yet. I still don't see it there. And those requests have yet to be considered. I did talk to the executive director, Mr. Renee Sines, at length for about an hour one day, voicing my concerns, but I still haven't received any of the documents that I requested. After the presentations of the scholarships on July 19th, I was approached by several residents out in the crowd when I went back to join my family that, oh, it must be nice to be a councilman's son, or I guess you need to know someone on the board to get these scholarships, which was one of Mrs. Sam's concerns, or how can that happen? So 9 years ago when I was elected to city council, I voluntarily resigned my position on the foundation committee and my post as chairman of the Parks and Rec Commission. I felt it was the right thing to do to avoid any conflicts of interest. I also informed my 3 children and my nephews that live in the district they're not eligible for any of these scholarships offered by the WCF, and they should look at the Walled Lake Schools Foundation for Excellence scholarships as an alternative to these. The day before the awards, after reading the entire list, I sent the email, and I just didn't get a response. So I'm concerned about that, as Mrs. Samp didn't get any response from the foundation. As elected officials, we should be reminded, gentlemen, that the best way to avoid potential conflicts or questions about ethics is to avoid these situations altogether. As newly elected officials, some of us went to MML training, and the topic of that training was ethics. And a lot of those situations that they taught in that class focused on examples of situations where residents and constituents might raise a suspicious eye. An old ancient Greek proverb says that a fish rots from the bottom down, meaning when an organization or a state fails, it's the leadership that's the root cause. We need to be cognizant of residents who have the impression that something smells rotten and take it seriously as elected officials and look at the situation through their eyes. It's my opinion that as one of the founding committee members, not a board member, but founding committee members, currently one of its largest donors to the foundation on an annual basis, and as an elected council person, we should work together with the foundation board and figure a way to get this separated once and for all. It's been 10 years, gentlemen. It's time to get the separation done. And also, if we need to make changes to the bylaws to make sure there's safeguards so that future situations like this don't exist, let's make those changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have any comments they'd like to make? I guess I've got a couple things. First of all, I was very concerned about this, and I so concerned that I did prepare something here that I really feel badly for the family because I think that there was an expectation there that there'd be a real consideration given. I haven't had much to do with this foundation because I've always felt that it should be separate, not have anything to do with the city. I guess, first of all, I'd like to thank Mrs. Samp for bringing this issue to my attention and giving us the opportunity to have an open and transparent discussion of the Wixom Community Foundation as it relates to the City of Wixom and more specifically to the City Council. I'm deeply concerned that because we have two members on the City Council serving as fiduciary board members of the foundation, and the fact that the city employees' time and city resources are used to further the interests of the foundation, that the public perceives the foundation as a branch of the city, which clearly it is not. I don't believe this can stand. Regarding the scholarship in question, I would simply ask Mr. Smiley a few rhetorical questions. First of all, have you read the bylaws of the Wixom Community Foundation? Secondly, did it ever occur to you that having a family member apply for and be awarded a scholarship from the very foundation from which one sits as a fiduciary might be perceived as a conflict of interest or a breach of the annulment prohibition set forth in the bylaws of the foundation, particularly one who also sits on the Wixom City Council? Finally, did any of the people in which you confide, consult with, or care about your welfare suggest to you that awarding or even applying for a scholarship might be perceived as a conflict of interest? And Mr. Kennedy, I would also point out, which I think Mr. Resnick already did, as one of the early members of the foundation. I thought you were a founding member, but as an early member of the foundation, and as one who Mr. Smiley looks to for leadership, I believe that you certainly should have advised your protege here that what is an obviously conflict of interest. Again, I'm deeply concerned about the aforementioned public perception that the City of Wixom and the Wixom Community Foundation are related, and that the reputation of the council has been sullied, I believe. Therefore, I've decided to come forth with a couple of motions addressing the relationship. I think that at this point, after I make the motion, and if it is seconded, because it may not be seconded, that would be the appropriate time, if you want to excuse yourselves, to excuse yourself. The first motion is I would make the motion that the City Council adopt a policy that effective September 1st, 2018, city employees will not spend city time, resources, or allow for meeting space, bookkeeping, note-taking, or any other services for the Wixom Foundation. That is my motion. Do I have a second?
Can I ask a question about this then?
Sure.
I guess I'm even less so aware, I guess, of the amount of funding or resources that come from the city. So I'm just curious as to how much time, effort, money Wixom actually contributes to the foundation.
I think that would be part of the discussion if the motion is second.
I'll second that. So we get on the table.
I guess.
Same question.
I don't have any idea. I do know that we have the finance department. Actually, this would be the time for the gentlemen if they wish to.
I wish to
excuse
recuse myself.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I have a conflict of interest at this point with this discussion, and I should be recused from this conversation.
All in favor of excusing the two gentlemen?
Aye.
Please.
Aye.
Okay. We'll call you back for this.
Yeah.
No.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Okay. Well, just before we move on, before we have a question, I just, in lines of the transparency issues, an organization, and I'm a co-chair of Wixom Team, we were associated with the Wixom Community Foundation for a number of years, and due to various issues that we had with the foundation, when we were involved with it, we have since pulled our money out, and we're aligned with another organization.
But then, are you in any decision-making?
Not with, but,
I think.
nope, but just,
I don't think
I just want that out there.
I don't think there's any conflict.
I'm gonna be the only one left.
We're going to be at 4.
Mr. Gottschall asked the question of how much time is spent, city time is spent on this. My impression is that the person whose number is on the list of contacts is a city employee, Deanna McGee, and she takes the minutes, maintains the minutes, and they meet quarterly. So I don't know how much time, it's probably a minimal amount of time, but the very fact that it's time, city time spent, I don't think it matters what the
No,
cost is.
that's not my point, because I agree, and I always believed that it was separate. I didn't know that we had city employees taking part in that on city time and money, basically. But I believe Mr. Hinckley had made a mention of city funds going into, if I'm wrong, correct me, but city funds going into the foundation. I don't know, because even when we're in the budget, there's no line item that says Wixom Community Foundation, $30,000. So I frankly don't know what amount of, aside from time, actual dollars go into it.
Don't try to FOIA the paperwork, because you'll never get a copy.
That's right.
And Mr. Mayor, didn't
He asked me, so I.
Isn't our finance director the treasurer?
Yes, the finance director is the treasurer, and she writes checks and balances their books or whatever. I don't know, I guess they don't do much balancing of books.
And the following question is, where is that money held in a city of Wixom account?
As I understand, it is. I mean, it's.
I mean, are we holding the purse strings?
Getting back to the original question, I guess I'm going to agree with the mayor, I guess, and say it's really, the costs are pretty minimal, and it's really more the philosophical question of whether we should be involved that's really at the heart of this. So just getting to the nuts and bolts of the question, just to begin with, the financial function is pretty limited. There's not that much activity. So in terms of a tremendous time drain, it is not. The same with Deanna McGee's time. She spends time on minutes. She probably spends time on agenda preparation and things of that nature when the meetings are coming around. Those are only held quarterly. Again, this is not a tremendous time drain. I think it really becomes just an issue of whether the council's concerned with our ongoing involvement of the city with the community foundation when it was intended originally, as I'm taking it for granted that that's what the original intent was, as it was long before my time, to be a temporary arrangement that's now reaching a 10-year anniversary coming up in 2019. So in terms of the expense, it's not a big deal. It's an opportunity cost, I suppose, for staff time, and that's about it. There is no budgetary line that is contributed by the city. It's not a big deal from a financial standpoint, but I guess it's just whether it's philosophically a problem for mayor and council as a majority to be involved in that fashion.
Who holds the money?
I'm trying to think.
The account, I think, is PNC Bank.
It's a PNC bank.
No, is it a city of Wixom account, or is it under Wixom Community Fund with Maryland as the check writer?
I believe it's that. Yeah. Meaning it's under a separate account with us as doing the signing and tracking of the activity. I can verify that. I was hoping to ask that question today, but I couldn't.
We come on up, Mr. Hinckley, and
He may answer.
fill us in, since this was your idea in the first.
I believe it is a city account, though, because when we used to get reimbursed for the Wixom
was check
team,
for the city
it was a
check?
check from the city.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when we used to sign checks, they'd come from the city, and Mr. Kennedy and I would sign them when I was still on the board, and they'd come from the city. The information that I FOIA'd, which is a stack of about like this, for 2 years, I disagree. I don't disagree with you
No,
much,
you're probably-
okay? But I disagree with you on this, on the time standpoint, because when I look at the time, and I look at the time from Marilyn Stamper's time on issuing the checks, it's probably been a little bit less, because I know when Mr. Beagle's foundation was tied to the city's foundation, there were, I don't know, one night she brought up a stack of checks like this for you guys to sign. Okay, so that's all on Wixom's time, our checkbook, the time with Miss McGee, our building. When they have functions, they use our plotters, okay, at the city here to make their signs and so on and so forth. So I disagree with you on that amount. And I also disagree with you on the fact that I do believe in 2015, when I was still mayor, we had a budget line item for the Wixom Community
Yeah,
Foundation.
you're right, that is correct.
That's right.
I was thinking of it as a separate bank account,
Yeah.
but it's not.
No,
It's-
so we had a budget line item for that, okay? So that, I don't know what you folks did with, the 18 budget, 18-19 budget, or 19-20 budget, but it is, like I said, a significant amount of time. And the crazy thing is, they don't even return the phone calls. And Miss McGee is like the secretary in that. So, there is a significant amount of time here, and there is our checking account, okay, and our treasurer's report. And the amount of information that I FOIA'd, the documents from the treasurer's report, it's time consuming. I mean, all you gotta do is look for it,
How did Marilyn become the treasurer? Did she volunteer? Was she elected?
Well, when Kevin Brady was, as Councilman Resnick said, he was one of our founding committee members, where, like he said, there was myself, Doran, Tom.
Predecessor.
Yeah, and so when he resigned, or not resigned, but when he retired from the city, it fell on Marilyn's shoulders.
So it basically de facto ended up as the responsibility of the City of Wixom Finance Director to be the treasurer.
Yes.
Because there's nobody on staff
He
at
ended
the
the problem.
Wixom Community Foundation to handle the responsibility at the time, so the city stepped into the breach, if you will, and did it.
Okay. I'll sit down.
Thank you.
I just,
That's been going on for 10 years.
He's the one that asked for you.
Oh,
He
okay.
misses you.
I really do.
I'll text you later.
So, aside from time though, do you recall the city actually giving any amount of money, like physical money, annually to the foundation? Or is it mostly just a contribution in time? And
Contribution of people's time. There was never any funds that the city actually gave, other than making that line item budget. I think it was actually the first year you were on council, if I remember. I don't remember what it was. It was a couple, $3,000 that we put in the budget for the Wixom Community Foundation, but it wasn't meant to give them anything. And the only other thing that came from that was that I established with them, which was the mayor's fund, okay? And the mayor's fund was meant for the mayor, whoever he or she might be, as they go out into the community to secure donations, which I got quite often as mayor, and we utilized those funds to contribute to various different families at Christmas time and so forth. And that particular mayor's fund is always charged X amount of dollars by the city, or by the foundation as like a fee. So it's kind of ironic that different accounts, okay, or of the foundation, that the foundation charges a fee to that account. But I think maybe it's more of like the bank account fee, is what I think it is.
So that, we'll just call it 3,000 for the sake of discussion, that one budget, if it was in there, that was more so to account for like wages and salary
I believe so.
spent
Yeah.
on writing checks.
Yeah, it wasn't money that the
Okay.
city was writing a $1,500 check to the foundation as a donation or something like that, no.
All right.
It was just to allocate that.
Mr. Resnick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the other concerns that I had in trying to dig out the information myself was the IRS 501c3 rules state that last 3 years of 990s must be posted on the foundation's website. They had never been up there, and that I couldn't even find a 2017 file, which concerns me as well. The I mentioned this to Renee Sines, the executive director, and said, Renee, I don't even see the 2017 up there. He said, I think it was filed, but you'd find evidence of it. So I think that, you know, if it was standalone and someone was responsible for making the state filings required, right? When we first started as a committee, we had a grants committee that was made up of teachers, right, educators in the area, and we had about 3 or 4 residents that were on the grants committee that reviewed scholarship applications or requests for funding, right? And that worked well because it wasn't elected officials doing that. So I think we need to go back to that, put this back in the hands of the community, getting out of the city. So
yeah, it's my understanding that Mr. Smiley also serves as the person that handles the website that those things should be posted on, I think. But, any other? Yes.
I'm just trying to wrap my head around it. So the council has no authority over the Wixom Community Fund at all?
No.
And we have no, no control over the drafting of the bylaws or the amending of the bylaws or any of those things, right?
No, as far as I know.
So we're just lending resources.
Right.
Okay.
Anybody else? Okay, we got a motion and a second. And the motion is to adopt a policy that effective September 1st, 2018, city employees will not spend city time, resources, or allow for meeting space, bookkeeping, note-taking, or any other services to the Wixom Foundation, Wixom Community Foundation. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. I think that we should, Tim, would you mind bringing back in? I'm sure they're going to be used again, but I do have another motion that I'd like to.
Do we need to do that?
Well, I'd like them to know what we're talking about, and then they can. I think that's the appropriate way to do it. Am I wrong?
Still related to the foundation.
Yeah, still.
Do you want to go tell them to stay out?
It'd probably be easier from an administrative standpoint and our board clerk standpoint to not bring them back.
Okay, well, why don't you stop? Put the brakes on.
Or at least ask them if they want to recuse themselves.
It'll be in the minutes anyway. Okay, I'll have a second motion that I'd like to make. I'd like to make a motion to have an independent third party look into the appropriateness of a member of the Wixom City Council and the Wixom Community Fund to serve as a Wixom Community Foundation member and to review the city charter, oaths of office taken by each of us, the bylaws of the City Community Foundation, the Foundation's meetings, communications, and any other relevant documents and materials, and issue a report to the City Council determining whether or not there was any adverse impact on the veracity, credibility, or integrity of the City of Wixom or members thereof. Do I have a second?
We've got another question before I put it on the
Well, we can't
I just
discuss
put it on
it.
the table. All right, I'll second it. Put it on the table.
All right.
Question, Mr. Mayor. So the costs for getting a third party involved, it would come out of the foundation because we're not at.
No, I don't think we can do that.
Right. So we're not.
That's why they're out there.
Spend money.
Yeah.
Well, I had a similar question too in terms of how do we determine who, that kind of a situation, because I'm not opposed to the idea, but it's just like when we go out for bid, we don't know who third party is going to be, what the time frame is, anything like that.
Well, my suggestion, this would be my suggestion, because I did have a conversation with our attorney before tonight's meeting, because I struggled with this issue and the motions, and I think that it would be appropriate to have, first of all, her indication was to, of course, hire an attorney to do the investigation. But she does have, and I wouldn't want to use that law firm to do it, but she does know people who do that sort of thing, and make those types of investigations and reports. And I certainly would want to put a cap on the amount of the expenditure, if that's appropriate. And also, I think it'd be appropriate to put a time limit on how long. We don't want a Watergate thing here. But I'm just thinking that in terms of try to clear our reputation here. I really do think that our reputation has been sullied here, and I think that it would be a good thing to do to have some report to find out if everybody we talk to, because I know I've talked to a lot of people about it, are wrong, or if they're wrong. That's my suggestion. Mr. Resnick.
There is the Michigan Nonprofit Association, the MNPA. I wonder if they could offer assistance as a third-party look at this. I don't know. I don't know much about them or what they do. I know they are a guideline organization. I don't know that they police anything. I've never really looked into it.
I guess. And can you read the motion again? Just to, because I had a question on it, but I just want to make sure I ask you the right question.
Motion to have an independent third party look into the appropriateness of a member of the city council also serving as a member of the Wixom Community Foundation, the board member. Also to review the city charter, oaths of office taken by each of us, the bylaws of the city community foundation, the foundation's meeting minutes, communications, and any other relevant documents and materials, and issue a report to the city council determining whether or not there's been any adverse impact on the veracity, credibility, or integrity of the Wixom City Council or members thereof.
Okay. So my question was, this would be an investigation of the conduct of the council members as it relates to the Wixom Community Fund, not the fund itself, right?
Right.
Okay. And then,
Well, how that decision was arrived at as well, I guess.
yeah, I mean,
So partly
So-
foundation's system.
That would be a part of it.
Yeah.
I'm dancing in the gray, and it was, so if we don't have any authority over the fund itself, how can we look into the conduct of the Wixom Community Fund?
Because it's a public entity and
No,
it's supposed to be.
Right, I mean, I'm trying to keep the distinction of separating the city council from the fund itself, which is why if we were to investigate or look into the conduct of specific city council members as it relates to involvement within, and I guess it would be almost any fund or any charity where there's an interest or a gain or the appearance of impropriety as it relates to one role and the other. But my only concern is I don't want to discourage community involvement from any elected officials, council members, or members of the public at large to be afraid to be fiduciaries of things that, for all intents and purposes, a really good organization for the city to have and an outlet for its residents to achieve scholarships or grants or anything like that. So I just want to make sure that we're not trying to, let me rephrase what I was about to say, that we're not looking to endanger the existence of the Wixom Community Fund, just more along the lines to try to get an idea of what the appropriate conduct is for council members and or anyone else with an interest in the city serving on a community board.
Well,
Is that my understanding?
Yeah, I guess I'm not looking for, with this motion, I'm looking to see if anything's happened in the past that would show any, or have any adverse impact on our reputation and our credibility.
The thing that we don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, because, and speaking frankly, what we do know, I think, is rather obvious, that it was a problem and wrong. and was a clear conflict of interest and goes against the bylaws. I mean, I think it's fairly obvious, and I don't think we'd need an investigation to determine. The question really would be, is at that point, what would we have to do about it? And what authority would we have to do about it?
I'm kind of the same mind, but I know they aren't the only two members of the foundation. So when this came up and reading the letter, my first thoughts were, it looks the way it does, kind of a thing, which is very obvious. What were the controls within the foundation, though? If they were recused from that position, that's the thing is, I don't know. I didn't even know the city's involvement to the extent of we are holding their money, let alone their own decision-making processes, because I've never been to a meeting over there. I don't know what they talk about, how they arrived at their decision. So I would like the investigation just to learn a bit more, but it's kind of, I'm trying to wrangle with how do we choose who does it, for what amount do we set for it. It's almost, we don't need to bid it out, but it's almost like we need to have kind of an idea of where,
well, I
where
guess,
we're going.
yeah, I guess we have to define the scope of the investigation. But I mean, it looks like a duck. It's a duck.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a duck. So with that in mind, I guess we're looking into the conduct of the entire makeup of the community fund, which only, and I don't know this for a fact, but only includes 2 people that we have any authority over outside of the Wixom City employees who we've just decided will no longer have, which we can totally do. I guess I'm just worried about us sticking our hands or our collective authority somewhere where it's not supposed to be. Because I wonder if the board itself or the community fund itself should order an investigation into itself to make sure nothing is going on. I guess that's what I'm struggling with, primarily.
Right. Mr. Goss?
It's kind of an oddity, because I think to a certain extent we can definitely get a third party to look into the actions of our own council members. But we obviously can't get into what any other members of the foundation, what they're up to necessarily. I think the extent of it is probably whoever we do hire has to FOIA things that were already FOIA'd, and maybe they get them, maybe they don't, maybe they have to go to court to enforce it. So that's where I don't, right now it's a big kind of an idea, and we don't know where it goes, because I think it's going to be part what Mr. Resnick did, asking for the documents. I don't know when you asked for them, what the time frame has been, but a few weeks.
We only have 10 days. I mean, you're only supposed to have 10 days to
Yeah.
get a document.
So that's the thing is,
It was the end of July.
to me, I don't have a problem with us looking into our members and the city involvement in general with the foundation. I agree that we can't get into looking into other foundation members because we don't have the authority to. But aside from that, I think we can, I just see it becoming, now we're hiring an attorney to FOIA the same things, that maybe additional things.
Well, I don't think that the motion that I made even suggests that anybody else besides the 2 members are being looked at, because that's where I believe the conflict of interest would be. But again, whoever we would suggest that get the position of the investigator, if you will, would be able to get the information. I know that even though Mr. Resnick was unable to get it, I do know in discussions with former Mayor Hinckley that he did receive from the city the minutes of many of the last several meetings, 2 meetings. And
2 years.
2 years worth of
2 years.
of meeting minutes. So I mean, it can be done and pretty fairly easily. But yeah, my concern, I had a discussion too, suggesting, and again, I don't have any say over what the foundation does, and I don't want any say over the foundation. But I think if it were me, I would, and I were in that situation, I would simply say, well, you know what? Let's award a second and maybe even a third scholarship, because yeah, we probably look bad in this. So let's try to get past this year and award these other scholarships of anybody who put in for it, and then you know, it's not like there's.
I mean, it doesn't. I mean, it mitigates. It doesn't clean up the mess.
Yeah. Well, hopefully the mess would be cleaned up.
Yeah.
Going forward, they would amend their bylaws to more clearly say what a conflict of interest is, because the enormement clause in there is a little bit hazy, but
I don't think it gets any clearer.
I don't think it does either.
No.
Your Honor?
Yes.
Related to where we're at, I don't know, it sounds like we're having a struggle with where to go with this particular motion, I think, because of the fact that we don't know exactly how this would come about. Just as an administration offering an option to try to do some research on this, there's organizations that do have relationships with nonprofits. I haven't been able to find anything that shows anybody having direct oversight in the brief few minutes that I've been trying to find something on the vast resources of the internet here. But I have not found
You haven't been paying attention?
I have. I've been listening and as well as typing. But I haven't found anything that jumps out at me that makes sense here, but there are groups out there that have oversight, not oversight, but have a relationship with non-government organizations like this type of foundation. And maybe I could do some research to try to find out if there's any organizations out there that do have oversight responsibility of it, and maybe we make an inquiry through that channel as opposed to a legal channel. I don't know. Just throwing up an alternative.
Well, I appreciate it, but I do want to keep the administration out of this, because I feel that you'd be in a bad spot.
Right.
Anyway, that you anything that you did, it just wouldn't, you know. I suppose. Go ahead.
No, I mean, I don't have a problem with an attorney looking into it, or any type of forensic investigator that basically does this type of investigation, for lack of a better term, you know, doing it. It's just, and I think we narrowed the scope as to the individuals serving two masters. Then, I mean, I don't have a problem with it at all. It's just a question of, do we have to put a number on it right now, or would it be
I would like to see a number before we get going on it. And you know, just from insight from me being on with the community foundation, communication isn't one of their strongholds. Is even when we were with the association, we would be told sometimes we were on the agenda, and we'd show up on the agenda, they'd take us off because they didn't want to hear what we had to say. So it's kind of like the brotherhood kind of thing there, and that's one of the reasons why we're not there now. But I would like to see a cap on this. I don't want us to go into some type of a witch hunt or something, and we get into it and keep throwing money into it. So before we, what would you suggest? What do you think? 5 grand, 4 grand? Yeah.
It depends on what. I think if the information that's already been gathered by Mr. Hinckley could be turned over and used as a starting point, and then, but if they wanted to conduct any type of interview or I mean, you're looking at a lot. I mean, somewhere like between like 5 and 10 grand just would scratch the surface on it, I think.
And that's a part of, I know we shouldn't bid it out, but is this something where we kind of give direction to the city manager to call around, find some people, get some estimates, go over the situation with them, and then?
I mean, I'd take a referral from the city attorney, just as to who they would because a lot of times that this would be done as more of as an expert witness scenario. So they, and they may be able to get a price break on our, I don't know. But I'm saying, like, it doesn't have to be an attorney per se, possibly a CPA, an accountant, someone who's familiar with nonprofit activities, or even Yeah. There's a lot of options, but I'm thinking you're looking between 5 and 10,000.
Well, perhaps what I could do is, rather than put a specific figure in, I could speak with Carol Rosati and voice our concerns, our collective concerns about the cost, and indicate that we don't want it to be out of hand, get out of hand. We want specific answers. She seemed very confident with the person that she had in mind. I don't know what it is, but
Yeah, I don't doubt that they would have a litany of people that could do it. But as I said, I think if we're talking about going back, a couple of years just to sort of see if this has been an ongoing problem, then yeah. But I mean, if we're just looking into the specific conduct that brought this on, I mean, it'll be $360 for an hour of an attorney work. That's really what we're looking at on that. So.
All right. Do I need to read the motion back?
So are we adding a?
Are we going to add just the not to exceed amount?
Yeah. We could do that. Let's make the amendment.
What do we want to do in terms of
10? Or is that?
I'd rather hear, because I've been told for other things, like putting in a crosswalk after a kid got hit, that some money was going to be too much. So I think 10 grand seems steep. I would rather, even if we're just calling the city attorney to get their recommendation, and then speak to that person and they give us a dollar amount. I feel like if we give 10,
no, I'm saying we wouldn't.
We're going to get a bill for.
No, we wouldn't give the number. I'm saying it would be something that we'd be able to approve without coming back to vote, because obviously we would get an idea. I don't know. I mean,
this is my feeling.
When I did talk to Carol, she did indicate that it wouldn't be anywhere in that area of $10,000 but
Well, let's put a cap at the
Put a cap at 5.
Let's cap it at 5 and go
Yep.
from
We
there.
need to change it.
Yeah, we can change it if we have.
we need to vote on an amended. Kathy?
Yes.
Okay, so who makes a motion to amend the motion?
Make a motion to amend the motion for a spending cap of $5,000.
And I'll second that.
Okay, let's vote on that first. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. And then to vote on the motion itself, we've had discussion. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. Okay, I guess we can invite.
Well, I was just gonna. Never mind.
Good. Yeah. Please. Okay, next item on the agenda is the second call to the public. I read the rules earlier on, and nobody's entered the room since I did read them, so I'll just open the second call to the public. Anybody wishing to address the council on any items, any issues at all, please feel free to come on up and offer your comments. Seeing no, I spoke too soon.
I was going to let somebody else. Kevin Hinckley, 3250 Johanna Ware. In light of tonight's findings and so forth, that the discussions that the council's had and the actions that they've taken, I applaud you for doing what you've done. Councilman Kennedy and Smile, you have an opportunity as board members of the Wixom Community Foundation to make this poor decision you did, make it right. And my suggestions are: 1, give back the check that was awarded to your son. 2, award the other applicants that I feel were cheated a $2,500 scholarship. You've got the money. You've got over $50,000 in the bank account. 3, get the foundation's business in order. A lot of us have worked for many years. We spent a lot of time putting that foundation together, and what I've seen over the years is it's just been degraded. Nothing's been done. Hell, you don't even have 9 board members. You've got 7. Your bylaws require 9 board members, and they can't even get 2 more board members because people keep leaving. So get the foundation's business in order. Get your bylaws. Understand your bylaws. I don't think you do. Okay? Understand them and keep the foundation moving forward. That's what you're supposed to do. That's what you get on the foundation for, to give back to the community. As I said before, don't be takers. I've always been that here in the city when I was mayor as well. Don't be a taker, be a giver. And that's what you need to do. Don't take from the foundation, give to the foundation. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have any comments this evening? Seeing no one jump up, I'll close the second call to the public. Next item on the agenda is the city manager's comments. Mr. Brown.
Yeah, so a couple of items from my report, Your Honor. The 2020 census representative came and visited with the city and has talked to us about potentially forming a complete count committee. And we're going to be having further discussions on that with the representative about how that might look in the future. Obviously, the idea there is to get as strong a count and accurate as a count as possible, both for the city and for the country. So I'll keep you posted as that moves along. That was a preliminary meeting that took place in the last few weeks. There's a variety of project updates that were provided in the report. I won't go over those because it talks about the parking lots. It talks about the work at the Highgate subs, as well as things coming up on the industrial road projects. Several work anniversaries that are covered as well. Congratulations to all the employees that are celebrating those. We appreciate your service and your commitment to the city and our residents, as well as the businesses here in Wixom. And there's multiple things in the calendar to be aware of as well. Block party, the DDA block party events coming up on September 8th. Variety of things coming up, blood drives and everything else that's contained in the calendar for your review. Those are the few highlights that I would make, and I'd be happy to talk about any questions that anybody might have or requests for other information.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda are council comments. Mr. Gottschall.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank, first of all, the city clerk and her office and all the poll workers for what seemed to be a smooth election compared to what I was hearing from some other cities, with too few ballots for too many voters, apparently. It was good to see the turnout. The only thing I did notice is with people sitting out with signs. I know every year we put the cones out, and that's kind of bypass, and I think some people have been going inside, like to the pond side of the sidewalk, and they're kind of inside the zone. I don't know how it plays out, but I think it's just something to keep an eye on in the future. And then I also wanted to thank Mr. Thorsell for volunteering to be an alternate on the ZBA. I know the mayor had made mention when we were having all of our standing room only meetings that applications were on the table, yep. And I'm glad that somebody was listening and grabbed one and filled it out. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smiley.
Thank you. The only thing I want to mention tonight is, on Tuesday the 7th, Councilman Gottschall talked already a little bit about, how the election went here. I don't know if Kathy, Ms. Buck rather, would agree that it was smooth. She made it look smooth outside and inside maybe, but I know she had a lot of struggles, especially with the ballot problems that Oakland County created, and she went above and beyond getting everything to work, and I believe everybody who wanted to vote that day got to vote. Well done, Kathy. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Resnick.
Okay, I want to offer my condolences to the family of Jeff Roberts and the loss of your father. Our hearts go out to you. Also, thank you to the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation and the Levine family for coming forward and getting this grant for our engineering for our Michigan Airline Trail. I also want to give my thanks to Kathy, and a lot of people don't understand what was going on behind the scenes during that election. Pretty much precincts throughout southeastern Michigan were running out of ballots, right? Our clerk's office, they are innovators. I mean, at 10:30 a.m., they realized that they were going to be short, and they made use of cardstock and the machine that we have set up for the blind that can actually print out a new ballot, as well as the test ballots that we had done. So they innovated. They made sure that nobody missed a minute waiting in line for that election, where a lot of communities, people were waiting hours to get ballots delivered back from the county. Thank you, Roy Torso, as well. And I don't know if everybody noticed this past week and a half, but the traffic on Wixom Road is probably 50 to 75% of its normal volume. So you close the bridge at Huron River, and I think it goes to show us that some of these alternative road tax methods for being taxed on your use per road segment, so it goes to the proper taxing entity, not a bad idea. We have a lot of people that use Wixom Road as a cut through to get to the freeway. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Leader.
Also want to thank the clerk's office for a smooth election day. And then just with all of the stuff that was going on related to the foundation, council members, I just wanted to mention, I don't think anything was done with malice or any poor intent. But, you know, as is the responsibility as sort of the keepers of the house, we just got to make sure that we clear up any appearances of impropriety to allow confidence both in the city council, in the city itself, and in its members. So I don't think there was anything that was done with bad intentions, but as we look into everything that's gone on, hopefully we can find some solutions and carry forward a really positive foundation for the community.
Thank you. Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Roberts, my condolences on the loss of your father. I particularly liked the cigar and Jack. I thought that was a nice tribute. I'm sure he would have appreciated it. Thank you to Mr. Thorsell for stepping up to be on the ZBA. Kathy, nice job on the election. It was a zoo. I can't believe that we were able to not have anybody turn away at the ballots. Congratulations to all those that won. And also, thank you to all those that ran and made it a written election to have some choices. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Congratulations, Kathy, on another well-done election. Condolences to Jeff Roberts on the loss of his father. Congratulations to the fire department on a great Camp 911. Thank you for allowing me to be there again this year at the graduation ceremony. It's always fun to see the students and listen to them, what they've learned over the week. Thank you to Mr. Thorsell for stepping up and volunteering to be on one of our committees. The mayor and I were at Movie at the Park a couple Fridays ago, and it was well attended and a lot of families there, and it was good to see, and another smooth event by our Parks and Rec Committee. And last but not least, we got the work-anniversaries. We got Krista Lopaco from our deputy clerk with 5 years, Michael Smith, firefighter, celebrating 11 years, Andrea Dickinson, our library director, celebrating 16 years, and Deborah Barker, 19 years, economic development director. Thank you for your service to the city. I'm good, thank you.
Thank you. That's what happens when you go last. I guess you're just reiterating everything everybody else says, but I still do want to thank Mr. Thorsell for volunteering and also wish my condolences to Jeff and his family for the loss of your father. It was a smoothly run election. I was there a lot of the day, and I was really pleased with the way that it ran, especially when I heard about the problems that were happening all over the county, and the fact that we kind of got through that without any real problems. And I went to a gathering after the election took place, and it was interesting to me that when I went up, when you go to those things, they always have a big screen that shows the results coming in, and you might be proud of this, Kathy, that Wixom was the first one that showed up, and it was accurate, and the numbers are the same today as they were then, and you did a great job. So, and all your volunteers, really appreciate their efforts. And also thanks to Diff and Umbler for their contribution of the work that they did on the parking lot. You know, talking about this, I agree with Mr. Leader. I don't think that there was any ill intent or anything that was sneaky that was going on here, but I do think that it's all about perception. And these complaints that came to me, including the one that I read aloud, we didn't ask for these complaints. These are people that are concerned, which concerns me, and I think that when you learn about the motions that were passed here, it's just to try to set things straight and to get things on the right track for the city and for the foundation. And I would agree also with Mr. Hinckley. I think that I wouldn't go as far as his suggestion of making anybody pay any money back. I think the winner deserved what he got. But I think that, I guess that's, the winner is not the right term, the award winner, perhaps. But anyway, I think that the simple way to do this, I believe, and I don't have anything to say about the foundation, but if I were in your shoes as members of the foundation, as guiding members of the foundation, I would find a way to award, consistent with past practice, I would find a way to award the person, at least the person that came in second, the award. I don't know how you do that. It's up to the foundation, but it would make sense to me to be a good first step to trying to resolve any bad appearance. So those are my thoughts, and with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Support?
All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I guess we're all going home. Thanks for coming out, everybody.